Now then, we've much to discuss. We have respective squads named for Ireland's tour to New Zealand. Meanwhile, Leinster and Ulster have bowed out of the URC at the semi-final stages. Very happy to say Brian O'Driscoll is with us on a Wednesday. Hello.
Hi, Joe.
Great to have you with us. Like I said, a load of things to get through. This New Zealand tour, I mean, the closer it gets and the more real it gets, the more exciting I think it becomes. There's a 3-day mini camp happening now for the Irish team. Andy Farrell was making the point that given the reconfiguration of the global calendar, very soon it seems a tour like this is increasingly historic. It may not happen again. There are 70 all told people going, 40 players, 30 members of staff. He called it Lions-esque.
Yeah, it's some size of a squad, isn't it? But needs must. You look at the beside the test series, the other games involved, the expectation of how physical they will be, the toll that's going to take on the squad. Also an opportunity, probably a realistic last opportunity to really try some guys to see whether they're going to be worthy of making it to his final squad in whatever 15, 16 months time. So lots of opportunity, but with it, I wouldn't say trepidation comes with it, but there's a nervousness definitely now the squad's announced, particularly on the back of what we've seen in the last couple of weeks, mainly from Leinster, which are the mainstay of the national team at the moment. And there'd be a few concerns about energy reserves coming to the end of the season, but that's the cycle of where we're working. You talk about the global seasons, why we're trying to match it up, because it happens to the All Blacks. It happens to the Southern Hemisphere teams in November, where they're coming to the end of their energy reserves, and we kind of get them. And then on the flip side, we go to and tour them in June, where they're halfway through their season. They're fresh and ready for international rugby, and you don't have one eye on your holidays, but you're trying to dig deep. So it can't come quick enough, that global season, because it'll kind of equalize everyone's performances at the same time.
And did you generally feel like you were running on fumes a touch come those June tours?
I think it's very dependent on the age profile of the individual. How much they played that season, how many injury layoffs they may have had, what injuries they are carrying. So there's so many kind of variables to how you feel towards the end of a season. The other thing as well is what you've managed to achieve from a success point of view, whether you're buoyed by that or whether you're a bit deflated by recent results, what happened in the Six Nations. So you put all of that into the melting pot, and all of a sudden you get a number of different emotions from different guys. You've got guys going on tour for the first time, guys that are really trying to stake a claim for a starting spot or a spot on the 23. And there's guys trying to hang on for dear life as well for another 15, 16 months to get to that World Cup. So you've got a real mishmash of how people are feeling, coming towards the end of the season. And there will be some guys that you'll really need to keep on tour, because they'll feel flat and they'll feel a little bit over, and maybe they haven't been excited by their provincial setup, and that they'll be looking forward to next season and new beginnings.
So this will all get underway June 29th with the Maori All Blacks, and then on the Saturday following that, July 2nd, New Zealand, a week's break, July 9th, New Zealand, then the Maori All Blacks on the Tuesday after that second test, and then July 16th, New Zealand. Gordon Darcy was in the morning show this morning. He summed it up quite well. He said, considering the quality and the physicality as well of these Maori matches, it's like a Six Nations in 3.5 weeks.
Yeah, that is a good summation. It is. It's different rugby in New Zealand, and even when they come up here, it feels it's all consuming down there. The man in the street, irrespective of the age profile of the people that you're chatting to, they mightn't necessarily know us as individuals, but they know who's in town, and they'll be keeping a very close eye on their All Blacks. And so there's no escaping it. So it's going to be incredibly intense, incredibly physical. You have to remember too that last November we got them again, and they're a little bit sore about it too. So they've a point to prove. There's a couple of question marks around their coaching ticket, whether it's definitely the one to bring them to the World Cup next year in France. So they've got lots of points to prove, as individuals, as a collective, and as a coaching ticket. So I guess you've got to be very wary of that fact. And we don't have a good record down in New Zealand. I was very bullish back kind of post Six Nations that, yeah, we can definitely go down and pick off a win down there. As we get closer to the tour, I'm decreasingly bullish.
I know, it's like just nothing really demoralizing. Let's just get out of there intact is almost the feeling.
But you're gonna learn a lot about, irrespective of victory or defeat, you're going to learn a lot about certain individuals and whether they are there for the fight. So
Mm.
there's a massive opportunity for the likes of James Hume, who goes down there, playing really good rugby. Um, you know, Depending on who you talk to, but definitely feel, people are saying that he's going to be starting to push Gary Ringrose for that 13 jersey. So if he's going to get to play at least one test match, you'd imagine, probably going to play in one of those Maori games too. So if he can put in a couple of big performances, then all of a sudden he absolutely is in the end of the selection conversation, rather than the beginning, where I think he still is at the moment. I still think there's a little bit of a goal. So for guys like him, this is an enormous tour and an opportunity for him to properly stake a claim in a starting 15 jersey for a full Irish team.
Mm. There are 5 survivors, I think, from the 2012 tour. A decade goes by pretty quickly, but Johnny Sexton, Keith Earls, Conor Murray, Keane Healy, Peter O'Mahony have all survived. And to jog general memories, that was Test 1 pretty well beaten. Test 2 was the one. There was the Dan Carter drop goal. I remember I was at Euro 2012 and we were at an Irish press conference and word was coming through that it was on and it was on and then it wasn't. And then Test 3, you need reminding, 60-0. So that suggests fumes in the last test. Certainly.
Yeah, but you know, we obviously missed our chance in the second test. Um, you know, one or two, I remember a really important scrum decision went against us when, of course, our front row thought it should have gone the other way, don't they always? And, all you can do is listen to your own players. And that would have been an opportunity for us to have had a shot at goal. So that was a painful defeat. Although a draw, defeat is all the same, as similar to the 2014 loss in the Aviva. It doesn't matter. You want that. We wanted all elusive victory, and now the one away from home is a huge one. You look at England back in 2003; they went away down to Wellington to the Cake Tin. Managed to battle it out with 13 men for 5 minutes of the game. Like, those moments are big; they're everlasting. For when you dig into reserves later on, in a World Cup year, and you're up against the same opposition, and you remind yourself that you can go to their backyard and beat them. So that's why this tour is so important. It'd be brilliant from a result point of view if we could get one of the tests. You do need to win one of the Maori games as well, I think. I think that would be a really good outcome from the tour, but you've got to get some form of victory, because the Maori games are going to be ferocious too. These guys are, playing with an opportunity to hopefully stake a claim in the All Black jersey too.
Yeah, because I must say I don't have a great sense of what to expect from those Maori games. I mean, well, the Irish team won't be its absolute best team potentially, and equally, where do they pitch up against Irish international sides? So you're saying one win of 2 would be acceptable, yeah?
I think so. And listen, you could probably say, maybe we shouldn't, underestimate ourselves and go in and hope for the two victories against them. But again, like you said, it all depends on the sides that are selected, whether it's going to be full second string. And I'd need to do a little bit more research into the personnel that the Maoris are going to pick, to understand, who's really in form, who should we be wary of. But you can't go down there and think, oh, one victory will be good. This is an Irish team that has gone on leaps and bounds in the last couple of years, and expectation levels should be a bit higher now, where, once upon a time, let's hang in there and see what happens in the last 20 minutes is no longer any good. Now we're looking at trying to win a test match down there, and truly believing that we can, not, hanging on for dear life. But the Maori games are notoriously physical. I look back to the Lions in 2005. It was like that 4th test match. And I know they were really getting themselves up, because, you don't get an opportunity to play against the Lions very often, but we ended up losing that game. it was littered with really high caliber players as well. That subsequently went on to the All Blacks. Sorry, there's my hotel phone going, telling me to get out of my room. You just have to be very mindful and wary that this is going to be a really, really tough test against quality opposition.
The other aspect of all this as well, and quite a few players have never been on tour before because of COVID. New Zealand in June sounds lovely, and then you have to re-jog your memory, and of course it's the depths of winter down there, and it gets dark early, and it's a bit of a grind. So they're having a mini camp today. If you were still in there and you'd been there several times before, and they were to say, "What's this like? What should I prepare myself for mentally?" What would you say to them?
I think if I was an experienced player, I would try to. You got to talk glass half full. You got to talk about the opportunity rather than it's winter, it's dull, it's dreary.
So bad. It's so bad, guys. Get out while you can.
It's a beautiful country, but you're not seeing it at its best. That's the reality of it.
Sure.
So I think it's really important on tours like this that you do have an ability to get away from the rugby side of things, because, as I said, it can be all consuming. So, I guess I'm probably not listening to my own advice in many ways, where I was all consumed by the rugby and I didn't actually get to experience the country. I think I would encourage guys to go out and separate themselves from the rugby focus, be it the analysis, the team meetings, the changing, the physio, all of that, and then get to appreciate what there is on offer, the activities, the events that you can go to that are organized by liaison offers and whatnot. I think you just have to try and embrace the country and get as much as you possibly can out of it, because you don't know if you're going to be back there again, be it as a tourist or even as a holidayer. So go and try and have fun, because that's if you're down on yourself and it's a bit grim, that settles and that becomes your form. So you've got to try and find a way to have a good time, and it looks like it's a really well settled, fun squad. Management are doing a good job. There's a good energy from them. So I think you've got to really harness that as well and try and get that to convert across into your play.
Yeah. So in the main, there are lots of areas in this squad which look great, and there's loads of depth. And then in other areas, and it's a few of the same old, there are question marks once again, looking at the general reaction to the squad which has been named. So certainly out half again jumps out to people. Johnny Sexton, Joey Carberry, Harry Byrne are the three. Jack Carty is injured. Ross Byrne, Ben Healy are looking on and seeing the writing on the wall. I suppose what we've said right across this year is maybe contrary to expectations we might have had some years ago, is that in 2022, Johnny Sexton, at his age, has only re-emphasised the gap between him and the pack, which is the extraordinary thing. So we can take that as read, and he's not under any pressure for his starting place. On Harry Byrne, just 4 starts for Leinster this year, and very much the anointed one for some time now. At this stage, what do you think their thinking is on Harry Byrne and taking him? Because there isn't a body of work there to justify, ordinarily, there isn't a body of work to justify going on a tour like this. And potentially with injuries, finding himself playing in a third test against New Zealand.
Yeah, I think trying to gauge what they're thinking, I think they feel he's got the highest ceiling, the most capabilities, even though we haven't seen it yet. And when he broke onto the scene a couple of years ago, I for one thought he was heir to the throne, and have ultimately, with everybody else, been frustrated and disappointed that he hasn't been able to deliver when it's been asked of him. He's a guy that tries the miracle ball when he comes on rather than playing his way into the game. He just needs to understand what requirements are as an international 10, because you can do one thing against Dragons at home, but it's very different New Zealand away, and the control aspect, and he has, I'm sure he's learned a huge amount from Johnny Sexton over the last while, but he should be microscopically going through Johnny's game and understanding what it is his major point of difference, and how he sees the game and the control and with his decision making. And I guess Joey hasn't properly had an opportunity to kick on through some injuries, through lack of opportunity. You'd have to imagine that all three of them have to get a test match, don't they? Why are you bringing Harry Byrne down there just to play in the Maori games if you feel as though he may be involved in the World Cup? It's a nervous time at 10. It really is. This isn't going away. And Johnny knows it himself that, as a 37, 38-year-old out half going to a World Cup, having to probably play certainly 4, maybe 5 consecutive games to get to a World Cup final is a big ask. If you look back at what's transpired in the last few years, it's a big ask. He's not the only one. I think there's other players probably as well that, would have a nervousness when you come, if you manage to get to a semi-final. And I know that's a nice problem for us to have. We'll deal with that if
I
that
wouldn't worry
comes
about
to
it.
pass. Yeah. But you still want to, it does feel if we can get to a World Cup semi-final, one of the hardest jobs is done in that quarter-final. I really believe that you can get to a final for sure. So I just I remain nervous that we've such a reliance on Johnny, and he is the age that he is, and as much as a warrior that he is, he has been more prone, like all aging players, to injury and to suffocation by the opposition. In La Rochelle, we see it in all games now. They're trying to shut him out. They're trying to knock him as late as they possibly can get away with it, because they realize how important he is to the Irish sides he plays in.
So that's you reckon Harry Byrne's going down there to start a test?
Yeah, I think he probably should be. I think you've got to be thinking that way, because say you lose Johnny, right, prior to the World Cup. Say he doesn't make it, and so then Joey's your guy. You can't. Has Harry played 2 tests? Like off the bench.
Yeah.
Like your third guy has to get test match rugby too.
But isn't that Leinster's response? Like, this is the issue. I mean, he started 4 games all year for Leinster. Like,
but
Andy Farrell can't be expected to get the game time into this guy. He doesn't have that many opportunities.
But like, is it his responsibility? It's his problem. It is his problem. He inherits it, but it's not the responsibility of Leinster to do it. They're two different teams. The responsibility of Leinster is to do right by Leinster and to win trophies.
But it's why it's such a weird situation, isn't it? That you have a guy who's jumped. Let's say you have Ross Byrne and you have Johnny Sexton, and you have the Irish management saying, "I'm going to leap past Ross Byrne and take the guy who's played no rugby." It's just an odd scenario.
It is an odd scenario, but I understand why it's happened too. I do. Sure. I think there's way more chance of Harry Byrne doing a good job, in my eyes, in a World Cup than his brother. And he's had a tough couple of weeks. I feel a bit for Ross, because I think he's really improved his running game this year, but in clutch moments, he hasn't quite delivered. And there was a nervousness that came with him comparatively to Johnny in the Bulls semi-final. There was a lot more fluidity as soon as Johnny came in, with less than half an hour to go. So I can understand why Andy Farrell has gazumped Ross and brought in Harry, because it does feel that with a bit of navigation and with him understanding his role, that from a talent and an opportunity point of view, I think he presents a little bit more than Ross.
And do you suspect if Jack Carty was fit that Jack Carty would go instead of Byrne?
I think he probably would. Yeah, I think he would. Even though I don't know if there's enough confidence in Jack Carty, come World Cup time. Like, anytime I mention about kind of residual scars left from the previous World Cup, kind of supporters go bananas, going, "Oh, will you let it go?" But the reality is that they do leave an indelible mark on coaches. Andy Farrell was part of that setup. So, I don't know if they don't want to go to their third 10 at the moment. In truth, they want Johnny Sexton fit, and they want Joey Carberry fit, because the next option hasn't proven itself when given the chances so far. But you've got to find a way to give them more opportunities this coming year, because we would really be left with egg on our face if Johnny doesn't make it to the World Cup for some reason, and we've got hardly any game time to our second or third choice out half, and he finds himself in because of an injury to Joey Carberry early on in the tournament. That would be that's a scenario we really don't want to find ourselves in.
I guarantee you, I can mark my words, I guarantee you in advance of the World Cup now, one of us here on the show will be asking you the question, should we rest Johnny until the quarterfinal? Because that's how dire the situation is going to feel. We can't risk him getting injured in the group stages. That's how reliant we're going to feel on him.
I think you can play. I think you have to play Johnny against Scotland. I think you have to. Like, I don't think you can take for granted that we're going to get beyond Scotland. I think if you would hope that, you know, somebody else in there, the job up front will be done, the platform will be laid for us to play, you know, get Joey into the system, as you know, and to be able to do a good enough job. You would be hopeful for, but I think if that backfires, then there ain't any quarterfinal for you. Or I can't remember the sequence. Is it Scotland first and then South Africa, or vice versa? But so it is. It's the two easier games, and then you've got 5 tough games in a row. So if you're getting to a final, and I just don't think we're not in a position to be able to afford to leave one of our star players, our captain, our leader, our organizer on the bench, or out of the 23, because we think we're going to get to a quarterfinal. We're not that team yet. Until we get to a World Cup final, we can't then, look and go, we're planning for the full 7 weeks when you could be home after 4.
Yes, agreed. Look no further than the RDS on Friday just gone. One last question in this whole area, by the way. Kieran Frawley goes as a centre. I mean, Kieran Frawley's playing about as much at 10 as Harry Byrne is this season. Is it beyond inconceivable that Kieran Frawley shouldn't be pitched in there? Does he not have a lot of the tools?
Yeah, he does. I was wondering, is he the option now? Because he definitely has the silky skills. I don't know the guy. We're missing a trick on the personality and on the individual, and what they contribute from a communication point of view, how they dominate a game, and that's so important to give confidence to the rest of the team. So I don't know Kieran Frawley, the individual out on the pitch, whether he is that guy. You need someone bossing things, barking at forwards, telling them what you want to do, calling plays in, dictating terms of what you're looking for as an out half. And whether Frawley is that guy or not, like from afar, he looks like a really nice footballer, and he's able to create, and he's a great passing game, and he's a good runner, and he's brave enough, and he's quite tall, probably could do with another little bit of muscle. But it does feel as though, is he the possible heir to the throne when Johnny goes, because of everybody being given an opportunity, and he's probably shown that most consistency, albeit he's played an awful lot of 12 too. So I think he's in at 12, but with a view to maybe using him as a 10 potentially, or sitting him on the bench in one of the Maori games and giving him 20 minutes or half an hour. I think very possibly.
Yeah, it makes it such an interesting tour if he was to suddenly flourish in that position. One other position which has been much discussed is at loose head. So Andrew Porter has come over and made that position very much his own. The supporting act there, I suppose, is increasingly in question. Cian Healy is 34. Leinster seem loath to bring him off the bench increasingly. Dave Kilcoyne is injured, and we've seen the likes of Eric O'Sullivan, Ed Byrne, even Peter Dooley come in and out of the squad. It's Jeremy Loughman who gets the nod here as third choice. But at a glance, that's another very important position where we're looking to touch light.
Yeah, think about the importance of Andrew Porter to the team now, to the teams that he's involved in, really, really significant. It's, we've had to develop our game where our loose head is far more than a scrummager and someone that hits rucks. He's a ball carrier, he's a poacher, he's a great defender. Porter is, and with Cian Healy, unfortunately, he gets the best, even the best athletes, and he's hanging on. I can feel that as well, because I was wondering whether I should have hung on for the World Cup in 2015, but I knew it was too far away. From Cian Healy's point of view, it would be great if the World Cup was later on this year, because to go another 15, 16 months is going to be a reach. But he's still doing a job for us, maybe not to the same degree as Porter, but you've got to understand that he's got 15 or 16 or 17 seasons in the bag already, and that takes its toll. So, and then has evolved and move. And it's very hard to stay relevant with, throughout extended period of time. So it does feel as though it's an area of slight vulnerability now, with the strength and depth certainly behind, Keane, who will do a job for you. But it's a pity that kind of Dave Kilcoyne, obviously through injury, hasn't really stepped up and kind of taken on the mantle as the the sub that comes off the bench to finish and close games out with 20 to go.
I guess if we segue into then the provincial weekend that was, and Leinster's loss to the Bulls, it's really, you even alluded to it earlier in the conversation. Andy Farrell must be sitting there on the back of a very good Six Nations and a very good November and thinking, oh, gee, the mood's been punctured here. And everybody is drawing the parallel between Leinster with 13 internationals in their side, beaten by a Bulls side who didn't have a single Springbok in their side. And again, it's that reoccurring theme of power which has come up. And looking at Ireland now in a different light, I mean, it's a funny. Andy Farrell stressed. There's Team Ireland and there's Team Leinster. I'm not sure everybody's fully buying that either.
Yeah, it's hard not to feel deflated by what's happened physically to the Leinster team over the course of the last 3 weeks. It was a defensive and tactical masterclass with La Rochelle. And then just teams realize that obviously shutting down their space, but also physically getting after them, because they're not the biggest team. And so you have to attack someone at one point of vulnerability, and whether they like it or not in the past, it's where they've become unstuck. That's not unique to Leinster. All teams go after winning the physically dominating, and no more than the South African teams, because that's their game. But when you realize how fast and loose Leinster can play if they're given time and space on the ball, and that they can play elusive and with footwork, and you got to try and stamp your authority on those games. The way to do that is play it tight, play it physical with bigger men. And the reality is, you look at the size of the second rows, even the back row. Doris, isn't a particularly big guy physically. Van der Fleer has been exceptional. So I'm very mindful of kind of not speaking about him in any negative terms. I think Jack Conan has had pretty mixed games in the last few weeks when a lot has been asked of him. So physically, you look at that back five, and it's not matching to other teams, other international teams, and that's going to be the mainstay of the international team. So it will always be a nervous concern. It will be, because it's a way the teams can and have done in the past and can get after us. And if they can physically dominate you, it's very hard for you to get a platform to really get a foothold in the game. So it's where all sides now will think that's our Achilles heel. We just have to physically dominate them, and then we'll be able to shut them down.
Yes. So it seems the Bulls, their mantra in the build-up to the game was 1 in 3. Let's slow down 1 in 3 Leinster rucks, and that's how we'll go about this game. And so then if they manage to do that, then 1, Leinster have to resource those rucks further. But 2, I suppose, if it is slow ball, they don't have the Rocky Elsom to say, we're going nowhere here, take it, get us moving. No one to bash through. That'd be the big issue, or certainly one of them, basically.
Yeah. I think, mind you, that said, when the going's good for Leinster and Ireland, we big up the ball carrying abilities of Tadhg Furlong and Andrew Porter. Kelleher, I think, is a loss to that, to Leinster and Ireland, not only from a line-out operation point of view, but from a ball carrying physical specimen perspective, very comfortable on the ball. So he is a loss. The reality is, I think we're light in the second row, literally from a weight point of view. James Ryan, very nice footballer, but has he been physically dominated in the past by Maro Itoje, by Will Skelton, by other second rows? The reality is yes. And Joe McCarthy's not, with new age second rows, he is significantly smaller than what he's going to come up against. When he plays against South Africa, if he does in the World Cup, France likewise, New Zealand have a couple of big units too. So we don't have the physical specimens. We never really have had monster second rows. We've had good athletes, but never really. but we've made the most of it. So we just have to get very, very accurate. I think, Leinster and Ireland have to have a real focus. And I know this isn't a chat about Leinster, but where they came unstuck as well, attack people going after the ruck. You look at the success that La Rochelle had at the ruck, and that just comes down to accuracy and winning the shoulder and being there early, and that's a reliance on fitness and bringing energy. So you just have to get all of the small detail really right, and that's the reality of where we are as a team against a side like the All Blacks. We've got to produce our very best and try and catch them on an off day.
Yeah, and then
Sorry, I'm jumping around from Leinster to Ireland.
I
Here.
know it's the weird thing. Well,
yeah.
This is the Leinster section now. I'll make this Leinster because Leo Cullen did say afterwards, look, it's not a wrong analysis to bring up the size. I know they hate when it's brought up, but he did concede that it is an issue for them. And obviously, Jason Jenkins is going to come in next season, so there is that. I wonder if Leinster been a little slow in their recruitment over the past couple of years.
But it's what have they been allowed to recruit exactly who they've hoped for? There's that committee, I can't remember the name of it, but how you've to pass through all international players through this committee that then will take on board your request and then decide whether there are enough Irish-based players in that position to warrant an overseas player or to justify an overseas player coming in and plugging in. In many cases, do Ulster need some front five players? Absolutely. Have they probably gone out looking for them? I would imagine so. Have they been granted them all? I wouldn't think so either, because they need homegrown as well. We need Tom O'Toole to be playing. We need Herring, who's Irish qualified, to be able to be in there, even though internationally is he possibly a little bit on the lightweight hooking, side of hooking. So you've that obstacle as well. It's not a perfect situation for the provincial teams to be in, because sometimes you're lucky that you land great players and it looks like brilliant business, but increasingly you don't always get the players that you're after that you feel would plug and fit into a squad and make you a more rounded contributor at Europe. So yeah, the Nathan Hineses and the Brad Thorns and the Rocky Elsons, it's great when they land. You often go looking for them and you're told, take a jump.
Fair enough. We've made the point so often Leinster find themselves in this strange scenario where for 90% of the season it's smooth sailing, and then increasingly over the last 4 years they're sucker punched. And I saw a stat during the week that Leinster have played 28 games this season, and of those 28, just 8 were one-score games, really tight games, one-score winning margins. Of those 8, Leinster have lost 6 of them. And you just wonder, are they practiced enough at being under real pressure, and even the bench, which they're loath to use in these big games against La Rochelle and the Bulls. Too often they're probably coming on in very nice positions, 15, 20 points up, see the game out, over to you guys. And I'm not sure what they can do about that. In some ways, they're victims of their own baseline standards, but they have to hit those higher standards in the big games, and maybe they're not practiced enough at having to do that and going to the well.
Yes, is probably the answer to that, Joe. I agree with you. I think the DRC with the South African teams in there over the course of the next few years, I think we'll get a better appreciation for more difficult contests, more physical sides, which has been the Achilles heel of Leinster of late. So the more times you play that consistently over the course of a year, the better battle hardened you get for when you get to the business end of the season and you come up against similar opposition. You work your ways through how to react to it, how to kind of counterpunch them, how to manage that physical side of the game. Whereas at the moment, so many of their games, even with second string squad, they're able to make their way through it. And we can't take away from the fact that Leinster, what one of the most exciting seasons in Europe. They were outstanding, but yet they've nothing to show for it. And it feels so unjust in many ways, but that's the reality of it, that until you have your hands on the trophy, you've got nothing. And you can play fantastic rugby in even knockout stages, but you've got to save your best for last. And they haven't managed to do that a few times. It also shows the depth of other teams, where, other teams are getting to finals as well. You don't fluke your way to finals. The Saracens, the La Rochelle, the Toulouses, these are all top quality teams. So, there's not a lot between them on their day. And whoever turns up and delivers, in that big 80 minutes are the ones that walk away with the glory. And Leinster did that in Bilbao against Racing in a close game. And then they've been beaten a couple of times in Champions Cup finals as well against also great sides. So sometimes we can be guilty of over analyzing these things, but they're not. Leinster aren't comfortably the best team in Europe always. They're one of the best teams, but there's other teams that are capable of beating them on the day, as has come to pass.
Yeah, maybe in some ways the way they cut through the lesser teams is almost deceptive. What about the lack of use of the bench? Like, for instance, Joe McCarthy on for 4 minutes, last 4 minutes against La Rochelle. He got 5 minutes Welford Road, 4 minutes against Toulouse. You've Keane Healy getting 2 minutes of normal time against the Bulls. Sean Cronin, unused substitute. It's kind of a striking thing in the modern era, not using your bench, not least up front to get in these big games.
Well, I guess with that, it's a coach's perspective on the quality of what they have on the field, on what their numbers are looking like. So they're looking at real-time data to see whether they're dropping off at all. You have to use your visual appreciation for how the person is playing versus, in kind of collaboration with the data and to make your decisions. So if a player is going well as far as you're concerned and working hard and doesn't look low in energy, very hard to withdraw one of your key performers like James Ryan, even though he's had a little bit of a mixed season in reality through injury and maybe not really hitting the heights that we expect in the big games. So yeah, I think there's a nervousness around some of the depth within the bench. And so when you take an Andrew Porter off, are we saying that Cian Healy is very close to Andrew Porter? I think the reality is not anymore. So you want to keep him on for as long as you possibly can because of the qualities that he brings. It's unusual for props to be playing 70, 75 minutes, but he's kind of that guy now. Likewise at hooker, you look at Dan Sheehan, who's been in for Kelleher recently. He could be a 70, 75 minute man easily. He looks fit, looks strong. He's he's a young guy as well, doesn't have many miles in the clock. So you've got to look at all of those different dynamics with regard to using the bench and whether you feel as though they're going to enhance the game or whether they're going to detract from performance. And that's a coach's prerogative and that's their perspective, and they know better than you and I.
No, for sure. And I do agree with you. We can overanalyze these things, and these conversations can almost sound a little bit entitled. Like, why haven't Leinster won? I suppose it's because they look so good for so much of the season, and there is now a trend. And they must. I mean, penny for the thoughts and the conversations between Lancaster and Cullen this summer. What are they saying to each other? I wonder.
Yeah, I think they have to remember too that they're on the right path. And just because you come unstuck in a couple of big games, they lost. I think the Bulls was a bit of a shock. That one. Whatever about La Rochelle, we shouldn't have been shocked by them. We were beaten by them the year before. It was never a 12 or 13 point spread in a final. That's ridiculous. And so and yet they lost by 3 points to La Rochelle, who played really well, and Leinster a little bit off. And that is the margins for from a differential point of view as to victories and defeats in key moments. I think the Bulls one was a bit more concerning because there was lots of unforced errors, very un-Leinster like moments, and I think that's where you kind of go, oh, is that tiredness creeping in? Why weren't they on? Why weren't they switched on for another big knockout game? So as much as the initial Champions Cup, you kind of tip your cap to La Rochelle. I think the Bulls, like you said, with no internationals and Leinster with 13, why weren't they able to get that job done? Yeah. So a little bit more forensically, they've got to look through what it is about their performance that they need to modify for when they get to that opportunity, get to that place again this time next year, hopefully.
Okay. So listen, it's an interesting point in the season for sure. So 2 months ago it would have been, wow, what a brilliant Six Nations, and Leinster look fantastic. Now what I think you're saying is Leinster in crisis, and if Ireland win even one of the 5 games, that would be amazing.
There you go. There's your headline.
Yeah.
That was Joe Molloy's headline for anyone that's listening.
Thanks so much. It's going to be interesting couple of months ahead. Thanks a million. Appreciate it.
Yeah, cheers, Joe. Nice one.
That was Brian O'Driscoll. Our rugby coverage is with thanks to Vodafone, official sponsor of the Irish rugby team. Team of us, everyone in.